So on page 25, I want to actually talk about microwaves today. Microwaves and sinks. Microwaves are a common question. Not only are they a common question to kosher them, but microwaves are also really important in terms of if you go to an office. If you go to, I know York University has this like microwave that like 30 people stand by and they're using it constantly. It's a little gross. I mean, I haven't actually looked inside of it, but I imagine it's not the most pristine machine. Anyways, we'll just leave it at that. So what do we do about microwaves? How do we kosher microwaves? What about we inherit a microwave that's treif? What about using microwaves for milchiks and fleishiks? And even the truth is, what about for Pesach and microwaves? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So microwaves are also a little bit interesting. As last week we spoke about ovens, microwaves are a lot smaller, which actually halachically is a disadvantage. We spoke about how in a tanur gadol, we're less concerned about zeya, we're less concerned about sin. That's not going to be the case by a microwave. And the microwaves can get pretty hot, obviously not nearly as hot as an oven, but definitely be hot enough, more than 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's take a look on page 25. So of course they don't use fire to cook, and they don't have electric coals to cook. What happens? It's very simple. The moisture, the liquid that's in the food, gets heated up, and that actually heats and cooks the food that it is adjacent or that's found inside the food item. So it really is a classic example of what we call bishul. There's a liquid that's being heated up, and there's no question there is steam. Often when you open up your microwave, right, kind of your door often has this like steam to it, right? So, and there's no question, like I said, it definitely hits 110 degrees. It's going to hit Yad Saladbo, so that would be a concern. There's steam and there is heat. So what do we do about koshering microwave? Let's say we inherit a treif microwave. So what we have to do is, number one, we have to clean it out very well. We make sure we wouldn't use it for 24 hours. We spoke about that last week. We would take a cup and we would boil this cup so that the steam of this cup actually would go into all the walls of the microwave and try to remove the blios, with the non-kosher food that was absorbed in the walls. How long do you need to zap your cup for? So this, it would depend a lot on the strength of your microwave. You're going to need to produce enough steam to actually steam up your microwave. There was a time where people said that 60 seconds was enough time. I'm not quite sure that's really the case anymore, and I would increase that to a good 5 to 10 minutes to really make sure that you're steaming up your microwave. I don't even know if there's actually a time here. Maybe there is. We'll see. We'll read on. In order to kosher a microwave, clean it well. Don't use it. Move the cup to another. Actually, he recommends here to do it twice. I think that is in order to really ensure that you're cleaning out the microwave properly. And actually, I double-checked. I wanted to check two different sources to see what people actually say of cleaning out microwaves. And so I'm going to read you the OU website in a minute. And once you've steamed out your microwave, what do you do going forward? So what do you do going forward? There's two options that you have. Yeah, question?
My first time hearing about it being 24 hours between being on the microwave.
I guess. I think you inherited a treif microwave.
Yeah.
Christina says, here's a microwave. It's a nice microwave. So what? So you should always wait 24 hours if really in between kosher.
But it's not like it's like metal where it's like a material that absorbs flavor. Really, it's not the same as like a pot that would like absorb flavor. It's kind of like what is it?
So steam. It's actually the steam. It's the steam that goes inside the walls of the microwave. There's actually steam that penetrates inside. What's the material of a microwave? What's it made out of? Is it a plastic?
And then so I'm like wondering plastic. Like is it like?
I remember it's pretty hot in there. It gets really. It better get hot in there.
I'm sure it gets hot, but can the actual material of the microwave
absorb
any flavor that waiting 24 hours would then make it
not binyomo.
Right.
Yeah, that's what you want to do. Generally the rule is when you want to kosher something, you should wait 24 hours. That's like a pretty standard. Whether it's a pot or whether it's a microwave, you should wait 24 hours. So, what do we do? How do we treat this microwave? So here we go. If it's going to be used with both milk and meat, let's say you want to use your microwave with both milk and meat. At home, what I've done and this is more because I have little kids at home and you have a nanny and you just want to keep things really simple sometimes. So we've designated a microwave as only for meat. No dairy allowed. Because what's going to happen? There's going to spill. I'm not saying you have to do it that way. There's no question of the stringency. Again, you should, for when little kids are around, or if you have, let's say, nannies around, sometimes the, simple and basic is often better. Or if you have men around, and they always make the mistake. I used that joke last time too much, right? So I won't make it again this week. But you want to sometimes keep things simple. And by designating it as meat only, you're keeping it simple. If you really want to, listen, I like to have my lasagna. I zap it a lot. Also, try not to have too much, milk on the house. Anyways, but let's say you have pasta and lasagna. You want to nuke it. You don't want to put it on the element. You don't want to put it in your toaster oven. It just takes too long. It's inconvenient. It's annoying. So you want to just zap it. It'll take you 60 seconds, which I understand. I understand that. So what can you do? So you can, if you cover the food, and you want to use it interchangeably between milk and meat, you should really cover the food, because again, all you're really interested in is steam. So if you can prevent the steam from going out, you're going to be okay. So by covering up your meat or your milk item that you're heating up in your microwave, and you're always covering it, by always covering it, you're essentially not going to allow that steam to penetrate into your wall. So the steam, shall we say, is going to ricochet off your cover and never go inside the walls of your microwave, in which case you'll be able to use it for milchiks and fleishiks. Again, you potentially are opening yourself up for, I forgot to cover it, or I don't remember what I did, right? But generally speaking, if you are pretty good at covering and you have you leave the cover nearby or something, the little plastic top, then in theory you would be totally fine. Obviously, if you're having something which is parv, and you're going to eat it with parv, that would be okay. But if you're going to have something parv and you're going to eat it with either milk or meat, then you probably should cover it as well. Yeah. I think because they're worried, I think you want to. I think to be on the safe side. You want to, you want to keep your microwave almost parv, really, on some level, right? And this way, you're less concerned about going back and forth. Yeah.
Let's say you go to a hotel that has a microwave in the room.
Right.
Can you do the thing where you assume that 24 hours is capacity?
Right. So I think that's a fair assumption. We discussed that last time about various, your bowls for cereal. A microwave, you could argue, might be a little different, only because, let's say you're in your room at 6 o'clock, checkout time's at 10 in the morning, they could have really used it potentially that morning for whatever, their pig, whatever it is, whatever the case may be. The issue, it's a really good question. You have to find out, do the average person use the microwave or not? If you had to tell the average person doesn't use the microwave in the room, then I don't think you'd even have to be kosher, because you could assume, look, the status, as I said before, I don't know if I mentioned this before, we'll see it maybe even later on today, if you find it clean in your house, you assume it's not been yom, you haven't used it for 24 hours. There's a microwave, do you have to assume, is it really used? I don't know about you, how many of you have been to a hotel that has a microwave? Do you really always use it? Maybe because of kosher we don't use it. I'm not quite sure. Maybe we're not really the average Joe Schmo. I don't know, go outside to Days Inn and ask a server. Do people use their microwave? But yeah. Right. So you're going to see, I'm going to give you the answer, we'll get there in a second, and that goes back to how to use the tripe microwaves in the office. Right, not all of us work at a Jewish place, right? Do you have kosher microwaves where you work? I think so, probably, I assume, right? Yeah. But in some, let's say you work at, some, waspy firm, some waspy place, what do you do about the microwave, right? You're not going to start do me a favor, purpose line, please don't use it for 24 hours, right? That's not going to work so well. But you'll see, there will be a solution. We'll get there in a minute. What else can we do? The other option, yeah. 24-hour thing is only trafe, and you don't want, the truth is, it's a really easy solution. If you want to use a trafe microwave, you don't have to kosher it. You can basically, I'll tell you the answer right now because I was asking. Just double wrap your food. If you double wrap your food, you're always going to be okay.
Okay, so your microwave is kosher, you use it for milk, and then can you kosher it in between for meat if you don't wait 24 hours?
You really should wait 24 hours. If you didn't, the evet, it probably might be okay. But lichatchila, again, going back to what we said last week about the shita of the Ramah, the Ashkenazi, the minhag is you only kosher something, you only kosher a kli after waiting 24 hours. Now, that being said, with a microwave that's only Zayah, that's only becomes not the wall. It's the walls. It's not the actual kli. Meaning, we're talking about koshering a kli. We're talking about a kli that actually the meat or the milk went inside the walls of the kli, went inside the walls of the utensil, as opposed to a microwave, right? It's not this. It's just steam that's making your walls and your microwave milky, which is a little bit different. It's a good question, but they really prefer still to wait 24 hours for koshering a microwave. Yeah. So what's the other way of doing it? Designate your microwave for either meat or milk, and then what can you do? It's simple. You can use your microwave for, let's say, for argument's sake, make your microwave mochik. Your microwave is milk, and you're heating up milk. You don't have to cover it at all. What happens if you are going to heat up meat? You just make sure that it's totally covered from all sides. As opposed to just covered from the top, you'd have to make sure that it's completely covered from all sides, tie it in a bag, put it in one of those containers, and that the bottom is really, really, really perfectly clean. What about a trafe microwave? So I kind of spilled the beans already. But he says here, very simple, double wrap the food. The wrapping does not have to be airtight. Rather, the food should be covered on all sides in a manner that, A, does not allow it to come in contact with the walls or floor of the microwave, meaning you want to make sure that you've put it on the base, on the bottom of your food as well, as your container. You've wrapped it in, let's say, a saran wrap. Right? You cannot use tin foil in a microwave. Even I know that. And B, that you're not going to allow any of the condensation that's going to come inside of your food. So again, you want to double wrap it in a way. So this is the obvious solution if you're in a trafe place, at the office, at the school. That'd be a great solution and very practical as well. And again, if need be, you can even do it in your own house. For whatever reason, if you prefer to do that. So, okay, good. Let's move on from microwaves to sinks. So again, you've moved into an apartment, right? I know some of you are moving in or just moved in or will move to an apartment. And what do? You've inherited a sink. You've inherited an apartment, a kitchen. That's not kosher. So it needs obviously to be koshered. And I would say 90+ of all sinks are made out of stainless steel today. Right? I don't think anyone has porcelain sinks anymore. That's not really so in style. Maybe super fancy houses have that. I'm not so sure. Right? I would say most people have stainless steel sinks, which are actually very, very easy to kosher. So Baruch Hashem for that. And what do? Simple. If, again, wait 24 hours. What's interesting about a sink, by the way, you tell me, how hot do things get into a sink? Are you ever pouring, let's say, milk, boiling hot milk, your 110 degrees Fahrenheit, milk or sauce or food down into a sink? Maybe. What? Right, okay, that's you pouring out grease. Okay. Now, sometimes, though, in a sink, you might even add soap, though, no? Let's say you're doing your dishes, you might have soap, which we're going to see a little bit later on, a little room for leniency. And also, does it sit there? Sometimes it goes right down. Okay, maybe it splashes a little bit. But one thing for sure you're really going to have, you're really going to have a kli rishon, right? You're not going to really have a kli rishon ever in the sink, right? You're not really boiling things in your sink, I don't think. Unless, I guess, the water gets so hot and you have, let's say, a dairy pasta sitting there and it's really, recooking it in your sink and it's touching the sink at the exact same time. I mean, you have to be a little creative to really, really make sure it's boiling hot food touching your actual sides of your sink as opposed to a pot or ricocheting off somewhere wouldn't really be the same. So more often than not, in terms of leftovers in a sink, it's going to be what's called, remember what we said, kli sheni or kli shlishi, a secondary or tertiary type of penetration into your sink. So there's a little bit of room to be lenient. Now be really important because when you often mess things up, it's often in the sink. And there's more room to be lenient because of sometimes how things get there and things are coming in contact with each other are really not that hot, and they're kind of ricocheting and bouncing off each other. There's much more room to be lenient when you mess things up in a sink than in other locations in your kitchen. So let's take a look here. It's outlined a couple of scenarios. If, number one, if a hot non-kosher liquid is poured directly into the sink from a pot that was on the fire, it will be absorbed into the sink. So we're talking about like these like worst case scenarios, right? So what is this worst case scenario? Hot liquid, treif, hot liquid that's poured into directly from a fire into your sink. However, if the non-kosher food was first placed into a bowl and then was poured into the sink will not absorb the taste because it's a kli sheni. And remember, irui kli sheni, something that's poured from this kli, is not going to render your sink problematic. And keep that in mind even when you have a kosher sink and you're pouring in the wrong gender, the wrong species of food into the wrong sink. Perhaps there are, if there's a really hot piece of non-kosher, wrong gender, milk and meat food that's being placed into your sink, that if it's really, really hot, that could cause a bit of trouble. And if you have dirty dishes that are in your sink and it's really, really hot and it's really boiling over, perhaps then also it can cause some trouble. But again, as I mentioned before, sometimes you're going to have soap in your sink, which is actually going to be a major room for leniency. How do you kosher a sink? Koshering a sink is probably the easiest thing to do. All you need to do is irui kli rishon. All you need to do is boil up hot water. By the way, this will be true for Pesach, and it will be true for a tray sink that you've walked into your apartment. All you're going to need to do is have a boiling pot of water from an urn, from a kettle, from a pot, and pour it all over the sink. And you should probably do it in a circular motion. Make sure all the water directly is hitting every inch of your sink, and that's how you'd kosher it. Maybe we're worried that there's sometimes in the drain things can get stuck in that drain, so you have to pour in more of like a liquid drainer or some type of more chemical something to clean out that drain. But generally, I think things go down pretty easily in a drain. Having good plumbing is a big bracha in these. Yes.
Okay. Say you're draining some kosher pasta into your sink, and the steam goes into the sink and comes back, and it's a trace sink, and it comes back up. Can that steam, can it revive trace flavors go into your food?
So if it's here, it's steam that's already been absorbed and it's coming back up. So that's like a secondary level of steam. We're not really so worried about that. Yeah. If it be direct from the food, then we might be more concerned. I'll give my wife's grandmother lives in New York. I've mentioned this in the past. Live in New York in an apartment. You only have one sink, right? It's just there may be a fancy schmancy. You ripped out your sink and you redone it. You're renting apartments in many places across New York City. You have one sink. What do you do? It's actually a very good question. It's worthwhile actually. How do you deal with a one sink home? I don't know. I think most even apartments today have two sinks. I think. Yeah. Two sinks in your sinks. I think most newer your apartment. Of course, better. Some of them. Right. Some places you rent will only have one sink. You seen? Okay. So if you're renting, you're not going to start installing another sink, right? Why would you do that? You don't own the place. What do you do if it's one sink? So the best thing to do is just get an insert, one for meat and one for milk, and just use the insert. And then you'd. Can't you have the meat and then have the insert just be there? Well, the problem is, let's say your sink is treif, right? So if you kosher again, you can kosher your sink and call it milchik, and then use an insert when you want to use fleshik. Right, you could definitely do that. Yeah.
Can I put an insert in somebody else's treif sink?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
You don't have to wash it.
I think that's what Bali Tshuva do is if they're in a home that's not kosher, they live in their parents' house. They keep separate kosher kelim, and what do they do about cooking? What do they do with cooking their own kelim? I mean, they're not going to make their own sink, right? As it is, it's difficult having your own plates and dishes. You use one sink, and that's what you do. You just put it in there. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly the situation I'm in. But
right.
When I have a question. It's when you're washing dishes, I can't. It doesn't fit really to rinse them, so I rinse them on the other side. Say my sponge or piece of cutlery, the water's hot, touches the sink, and I pick it right back up. Is it now tree?
So if you have a if you have a spatula,
or metal fork.
Or if you have a metal fork, so remember that if your metal fork touches the pig is actually fine. You're going to need heat in order to create a reaction that's going to cause that taste to penetrate into your fork. So if it's boiling hot, touching, the chances are really unlikely that's going to happen.
Even if it's yadletable water, like.
If you're pouring yad soletable water on your fork and the side of the sink at the exact same time, there are going to be blias of the side of the sink that's going to go into your fork. But remember, the water is actually it's actually called napanat tera, because the water is actually one that's causing it, which is actually permissible. So it's really not such a bad I mean, you shouldn't do it, obviously, but it's not going to render.
Accidentally, it falls in the sink.
If it actually falls in the sink, right? Yeah, it's that would only be a problem if there's the residue of something not kosher sitting there. That could be a problem. But to remove a blia from the sink and have the traciness of the sink go into a fork is it's gonna have to be pretty hard to do that. Yeah.
So for the insert, say you're using the same, you have like a fleischer sink and you want to wash part, you can just put in an insert and you don't need to wash out the sink or anything?
I mean, if there's not touching it, you should probably wash out to be clean just in case something falls or spills. Dude, I just mentioned this because I just totally off topic, but I never even occurred to me. But I walked in for 3 minutes in the COR. They're doing like a Kosher thing there. I got here a few minutes early, so I just walked in just to listen a little bit. And someone had asked a question. I figured it's worthwhile saying this because everyone there was shocked by it. So it's definitely worthwhile saying. How many of you have Keurigs at home? Don't worry, it's good news. I have good news for you now. You have a Keurig. You know a Keurig, those coffee machines. So what do you do if you use a Keurig with hot chocolate, which is dairy, and then you want to have a coffee with and your fleischiks? So meaning, if you make your Keurig milchik, how are you ever going to have a coffee after your fleischiks? Well, the answer is actually totally fine, because, and this is what it goes back to. Think about this for a minute. I'm using a Keurig now at 9 o'clock at night, and it's milchik. So now my Keurig is dairy. So if you're really having a coffee right after, so there's a little bit of the milk, hot chocolate residue in there. But let's assume let's flip around the example. Let's say at lunch I had a milchik, a milchik hot chocolate. I had a coffee then at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because I'm a bit of an addict, and I'm having another coffee at the 9 o'clock at night after I had fleischiks, Sunday night, so of course you had Shabbos leftovers. Right, that's the minhag. So, if you're having 9 o'clock coffee, what am I going to do? Isn't my Keurig milchik? The answer is no, it's not milchik, because it's not because you koshered it in between making a coffee. It's not going to kosher the Keurig. It's because that's a classic example of, well, think about what's really penetrating. Your coffee, your hot chocolate, which is sitting in this cup, there's water passing through it that's going into your tip. Everything is totally kosher. It's not a problem. So you're not going to say that it's now become milchik forever, even though, by the way, it's hot enough. It's 110 degrees. And what are you making? A coffee. Your coffee's not fleishik. Your coffee's not milchik. It was used in a kli that had milchiks in it, but that does not make it milchik. And you'd be allowed to then have a cup of coffee, believe it or not, while you're still fleishik, right? And that's a good thing to remember. Now, if it's right after, the residue might be a problem. So, 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
How much time?
I probably better to have a coffee in between, or run it in between.
What if it's like a office Keurig and someone had a tray thing?
By the way,
and you had
okay, so here's the issue. If it's be very careful. This is not treif, right? Meaning, the hot chocolate isn't treif, your coffee isn't treif, and the water is not treif. Those are things that are called napar not tehetera. They're all permissible things by themselves. That's important to remember.
Some of them are not kosher.
Okay, so some of them are not kosher. So that could be a little bit more of an issue. When they say they're not kosher, they're really not kosher. They're treif. So that's something you have to look into. Why is it that they're not kosher? Because that.
So no.
Yeah.
When I first did this right there the first time.
Yeah.
4 years ago, we discussed.
Can you just close the door? If you don't mind?
We discussed this in the Kollel down south with Rabbi Miller.
Yeah.
And he said just run it 3 times, empty run, and you're okay.
In between,
In between, just run it 3 times, and you're okay.
Of water, with water.
Plain water.
So it's plain water.
That's what
That's
I mean.
after a non-kosher one?
Period. In between milchiks and
Right.
whatever. That was what the discussion on the table was when we were doing smicha the first time.
Oh, there you go. Okay, water 3.
Either way. You said either way.
So interesting. They asked the COR, the Mashgiach there said,
This is
just make sure to have 1 coffee in between. But as opposed to for treif, you can just run it through water a couple times. Yeah.
This is when it first came out, the discussion on the table. So they said 3 times.
Yeah, Curry's probably been for what, 3 years? 3 years? Yeah.
5 years.
5 years. There you go.
I drink that coffee that you made in between.
No. But let's say you're drinking that coffee because you're milchiks. I mean, yeah, that's what I meant. Like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're still milchik. You're not always milchik. You finish at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you're still milchik, so then I can have your coffee. Yeah.
Wait, is that only talking about if actual cup has like an OUD on it? Because some people you can like where you fill it up with water, you fill it up with milk. That's different.
Where you fill it up with water. Okay, this already. I don't know what you're talking about.
Because
You don't put milk. You put milk in your machine.
Oh, I didn't. I thought like.
no, there's no milk goes into the Keurig machine. It's water.
It'll kill it. It'll ruin the machine, won't it?
Yeah.
Won't it ruin the machine?
I don't know. I heard that people said, "Oh yeah, you make it with milk."
I've never.
So the things
No?
have milk
Okay.
ingredients
I've had
in them.
5 years.
No, I know that. Like I know the cup that's in the hot chocolate cup.
You can buy a fancy schmancy. I went to a guy's office once, and they had like a cappuccino machine, where you actually can add milk, right? And that would be different. That's the milk has been boiled. That's
Yeah, like a milk capsule. Like Starbucks just came out, like your milk pod in the yeah, you're right. And that's 2 places. Yeah. Either that or it's one after the other.
But be careful. If it's just a milk pod, it'd be the same thing. So what if it's a milk pod, Ariel?
Water to the milk pod, like it's like probably like a milk.
It doesn't matter. So you can still use it for. You're still parv, meaning it's still a. I mean, not like the milk pod, but like you'd be allowed to have a parv coffee once you've cleaned it out. Yeah. Right? No.
Yeah. That's what we've always.
Right, as we said.
And the bigger question we always have is Pesach time.
Right, Pesach.
Because you can make your own Keurigs. So
Can you make one that's kosher to Pesach and use it?
And use the same machine. That was the other question.
And what'd they say?
Well, we never got it.
We never got the answer. That's interesting.
I don't know if you ever seen the Keurigs you can make yourself. You can fill up with your own powder. You make your own.
Wow.
And the table was, can you use on Pesach? So we never got it down to that answer because they told us move on. It's this, they're not Pesach.
That's right. Be careful. When it comes to Pesach, Pesach is not governed by regular halachic. Okay, let's move on, ladies. Where are we? Let's move on to countertops. Yeah, let's get down to countertops. 27. Countertops have advantages again, like everything, have advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, if you're going to spill, let's lose our scenario. You've now moved into a new apartment. It was owned by McDonald's, whatever. I don't know. There's the original last name that I came up with. And what are you going to do? Because in theory, potentially, what could have happened? The previous owners could have taken their non-kosher sausages and poured boiling hot sausages over your countertops. That's a great thought right there. So, but just placing a dirty pot or a dish on a countertop is not going to be a problem, right? The truth is, Svardim don't even have milchik flesher countertops. The minhag Ashkenaz is to distinguish between meat and milk countertops. But really, I mean, think about it for a second. Let's pretend this actually, by the way, is what material is this? This is laminate. That's not wood. This is some cheap laminate, right? That, by the way, that is often found on your countertops, unless you merit to have granite countertops. You should all be zocheh to have granite countertops one day. So, amen. There you go. One day. My wife says the next time we redo the kitchen, that's what we're getting. So we're looking forward to that day. All right. But for now, we have these countertops which are made of material, which is going to be very problematic because you can't kosher this. There's no way to really kosher this material simply because you're going to boil water. I mean, it'll ruin it. It'll buckle it. It won't work. You can't really be done. But on the other hand, if I take a pot, let's say I have a pot and I put it on my countertop, it's really not such a problem because you need to have a medium of liquid, right, in order to make something not kosher. So if I put down a fork, if I put down a pot, the truth is, they say you should never put a boiling hot pot ever on a countertop. It's not good for a countertop, unless, of course, you have granite. Right now. But the truth is, you probably even avoid putting direct hot things on tray countertops, but really only because they're worried there might be steam, maybe there's a bit of a liquid that's on your pot. But really, it's not going to be so easy to make your countertops, make your pots that are on countertops trays. Food could be a little bit different because if you're going to have your if you inherited non-kosher countertops and on your counter you have your boiling hot pasta that's going to fall on it, that potentially could be a problem. If it's food, not if it's going to be like a kli or not or like. Okay, so what? Yeah, if a fork falls on a countertop, it's not going to. Even if your fork is boiling hot, for whatever reason, somehow you did that, which would be.
Hot. Like you took it out of a wet pot and you put it down.
Right. Even by then, right, exactly, me cooking at the same time. That's going to be pretty hard to do. Yeah, it's going to be really hard to do.
So if you drop hot food on a tray countertop,
I wouldn't eat. No food. I wouldn't eat hot food that was directly on a countertop. We kind of said last week. Remember our porcelain on our oven, space between the elements. Also, you should try to avoid. Okay. I spoke from a hot pot directly. However, just placing a hot pot or hot dirty spoon onto the countertop will not cause taste to transfer and be absorbed in the countertop. The third line. The rule is that one vessel cannot absorb taste from hot food in another vessel by touching each other when they are dry. In theory, you could even have a hot chicken soup pot touch a hot dairy wacky mac pot. They could touch and it actually would not be a problem. Because they're just hot dishes. You need a liquid medium in order to transfer taste, and you don't have it in this event. Now, and a little bit of moisture, it's not really considered enough. They have to have a lot of moisture, a lot of liquid to make that bridge between the two. Oh, and he actually says this. There, right? There's a little bit of moisture on the outside of the pot. It's not wet enough to make any taste transfer. If, however, it's placed on a very wet surface, then you potentially could be a problem. So if you spilt a great deal of, some soupy sauce or whatever, that might be an issue. So if that's what you're doing, you have bigger problems. So, yes?
What if the meat pot and milk pot are next to each other and they're both hot steaming and maybe the steam's coming out of them?
We're not worried about steam in an open area. We're worried about steam in an enclosed area.
An oven.
Right, an oven or a microwave. If it's open, we're not worried. We're the steam is just gonna.
I remember hearing that, if you're cooking, say, chicken soup and, cooking some pasta, that dairy pasta together, they shouldn't be next to each other. If steam came out, it could transfer taste.
Not if it's open on your element. Not if it's open in your, on your stovetops. I mean, I wouldn't do it simply because you're potentially playing with fire. Mm-hmm. I mean, you are playing with fire, but that's not the fire I'm referring to, right? Yeah. So, it's just too, it's just not a smart thing when you're cooking, meat to walk around with milk things, because inevitably you bump, trip, fall, spill, we're klutzes, Okay, so that's here, top of page 28. I think for Pesach, interesting, for Pesach we're going to be machmir. For countertops, you really should place a quarter inch or a third inch of something on your countertops. You really shouldn't use regular countertops. On Pesach, you should really, unless it's granite, but because it's stone and stone can absorb. But otherwise, you really shouldn't use the same countertops for Pesach as we do during the year. Okay, the tables. So obviously, tables aren't really a problem. No one's cooking on tables. I shouldn't be anyways. Again, for Pesach, you'd have to cover it. Maybe if it gets for hot, you should cover your tables. Sorry. But for a non-kosher table that you've inherited from somebody, it's really not such a problem. If you think that they really did use it, if it was like a kitchen table, a table that was really used often to eat from, and they really ate from it, so then you probably should kosher it, because you're worried that hot non-kosher food actually fell on it. And in terms of using the same table for milchiks and fleishiks, we do not do that. We're just worried that perhaps hot meat absorbed into the table then you don't want to have in the same place hot milk. So that's why we use placemats or tablecloths. And they state they're good shidduch. You're supposed to use proper tablecloths anyway. So yes.
This issue really I never get it.
Okay.
Because the mat itself isn't. You're not concerned with a plastic mat absorbing flavor. You're on a plate. It's not a clear shot. It's probably cliche.
Wait, so I have a cliche. I have a plate that I've now put my chicken on.
Right.
Yeah. So cliche.
Mat, which is not going to absorb any flavor. So
right.
Why can't I use that with dairy food on
on that same mat?
If I wipe
you
it
really,
down,
look. You probably could. I think we're worried that if your meat is going to spill, your hot meat is going to spill on the mat. Dairy. You're right. You're right. It's really pick it up. You're right. It's not. When it comes to milk and meat eating placemats, the minhag is to have separate covers for milk and meat for tablecloths. Tablecloths are not good. You're right. You could really say I don't understand. It's not we just spoke with the countertop. But you're right. But also we're talking about food that's spilling there, and if the food spills there, you might be likely to eat it. Well, yeah, the kosher table you could use Irui Kli Rishon, which is gonna destroy your table, would be a problem. Irui would be the way to do it. Boiling hot water, pouring it over it.
So how do you kosher the countertop? Also just pour?
So you can wipe it down really well. The question is Irui really going to be sufficient at all on countertops? Because it's true that your material is going to absorb anything anyways, and actually by doing Irui, right? Not if it's granite. If it's what's it called again? If it's laminate, you're really koshering it anyways. You could do it. The also thing you're going to ruin your laminate if it's boiling. I don't think they do anything for laminate. No. Boiling water. That's what they do for Pesach? I don't even.
Pesach they do.
You just pour boiling hot water, then it's sufficient.
For Pesach, but it cools off right away.
Yeah.
It's layers. You pour it on and you just put your hand on it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's amazing. I'm in big trouble. It's gonna happen. All right. The truth is, schlepping. I don't know about you guys, what you do for Pesach, but schlepping those boards from the basement upstairs, it's worth it just to have granite countertop just for that. I inevitably kill my back. Corrugated plastic. That's a good idea. Okay. Home Depot? Alright, there you go, next year. Knives. So there's a joke with knives that people have instead of having gardens in the backyard, knives in the ground. It's a really strange myth. I don't know where, I kind of know where it comes from, but to really kosher a knife in the ground is almost impossible. We're actually going to read the only case where you could actually do it. Yeah, put it for a year. All these things are, a lot of these are a little bit bubamaises. Right, I plant with them and stir with them. This is the only case maybe on the top of page 29. Here we go. If a knife cuts cold, hard food. So if I have a knife, it's important to know knives are interesting because of the blade of a knife, and it could be even by certain sharp forks. But the blade of a knife is called duchta de sakina. Literally, the penetration of a knife creates a type of, almost produces a mini heat, so to speak. So if I'm cutting cold cheese, a cold dairy cheese with a knife, it actually, remember we said before, if it's cold, well, nothing should absorb. What's the problem? No, when it comes to a knife, the friction of the knife on something cold, also there's something that gets absorbed into the blade. Excuse me. Is the pressure of the knife. In Hebrew it's called duchta de sakina. Therefore, if someone cuts cold cheese and afterwards cold meat, the knife is not kosher. Furthermore, the cheese taste from the knife will stick to the meat and needs to be scraped off. You have to scrape a third of an inch from your meat because of the cheesiness where the blade made contact was placed on there. In order to remove the taste from the knife, stab it in hard soil 10 times. And then clean it afterwards with steel wool, or with steel wool or hard plastic, which is Scotch Brite. It is right. That is the only case that is legit. Not like, oh my god, my knife is not kosher. I just stick in the ground, then it becomes kosher again. Most times to make your knife kosher, you need hagala, right? The only time you wouldn't is if it cuts your dairy knife cuts something cold, and then you cut meat cold, your knife is in this strange status of it's not really kosher, but you don't need to do the hagala, you could just do the 10 times stabbing in the ground. By scraping the knife, you're removing any food, because really, really, really what's happening is that the milky meat is not going inside your knife, it's just sitting there as a residue on the blade. And so you just need to kind of really clean that blade really well, and by stabbing in the ground 10 times, that would be deemed sufficient. By doing this, you can cut bread to eat with the opposite food. Some say you can never cut the opposite food after stabbing it. However, in either case, one should not rely on stabbing except in extenuating circumstances. And the eats of a karka is what this is called. We don't really do it today. It's not really considered standard practice. Better to do hagala on your knife. That's definitely better if you're really desperate, because it's, your favorite knife, and the hagala is difficult. There are ways you can be lenient to do it, but really, 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 we don't really do the stabbing in the ground 10 times, but that would be the case to do it. Blenders and food processors are a little bit challenging to kosher, because they have so many small little parts that would need to be koshered. Kosher them is not very difficult if you just follow the basic guidelines. And what are these guidelines? Simple. If they're used for hot, non-kosher food, or milk and meat, then each part just you have to use hagala. However, if they were used as a chopped cold meat or milk, so in theory, nitza would be sufficient. And obviously, you're not going to do it in the ground. That's weird. It's not very practical with these types of blades. So you could use steel wool or Scotch-Brite, or that would be sufficient. And the jar, the container itself in these food processors, if it's plastic or glass, so we know what you need to do to kosher those things. Usually hagala would be sufficient for both of them. Okay, dishwashers. So I will tell you a personal story. Dishwashers are a bit of a problem. There's a lot of plastic. Sometimes they're what's it called at the bottom there? The drains. Maybe sometimes can get residue stuck in them. If it's a stainless steel dishwasher and to replace the racks are considered very expensive. What do I consider very expensive? Generally speaking, when you get married and move into an apartment, everything is very expensive, right? In which case, if you would just do hagala on your dishwasher a few times, it would be sufficient if it's stainless steel. If you have a plastic dishwasher, there are different opinions what to do. I'm actually not going to take a stand on that because it's a little bit complicated. There are ways to do it. It really depends on the type of dishwasher, the exact specific material, what it really costs to replace the racks. So it's a couple of too many factors that I want to deal with at this point. Yeah.
How do you do a go?
You run it through a cycle.
Shiur 17 will talk about dishwashers.
Yeah. They do talk about it more detail a bit later. Yeah.
Lots of 17.
Right. Oh, I didn't even realize that, actually. Yeah. Okay.
You can kosher it yourself, like by boiling it in water, like at home, like.
It really depends on the. Apparently, it's less than 17. Said Rabbi Yosef. I didn't even realize that. Yeah. So we can. If you want, I could show it to you. It really depends on the material and how it's used and when it's used.
Like I'm just wondering if like
Yeah.
you do that at home, like that.
Under certain circumstances, you'd be allowed to. Yeah. If you want, we can talk about it later. Okay. I wanted to. Obviously, I'm not gonna get through. I emailed everyone 24. It's one of the most practical. I don't know why it's saved to the end. It makes sense to do it now. I'm going to be told to switch it. You know why? What the logic is to do it at the end?
There's stuff in between that we do. We get into dishwashers, we get into spoons, we get into dishwalakum, we get into.
That's why?
Dish loam, yeah, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they put that. I mean, you can do whatever you want.
Right. I don't know. I like the truth is, though, we don't. I'm about to give an Amud Yomi Shiur in about 10 minutes, so I don't want to. Not even like in 8 minutes. So I'm not even going to bother starting. So I'm not going to get too far. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll have to put this on the back burner, mixing up silverware for another time. Next week and the week after, we're going to do Tfilas Kelim, which is also a very practical unit. What needs to be toveld with a bracha, without a bracha, machmir, not machmir, what's the minhag, what needs to be done. I was once stranded out. Someone asked me to help out with a barbecue out in the middle of nowhere, and they actually had a brand new barbecue, but they didn't tovel any what do you do in certain situations? There's no river nearby, and this was like a golf tournament that was happening in 2 hours, right? And people who pay a lot of money for golf tournaments really like their food. So what can you do? There's a lot of creative solutions what to do. There's a lot of misnomers, a lot of stringencies about Tfilas Kelim that I've discovered. So hopefully we'll be able to clarify those, God willing, over the next 2 weeks. Yes?
Should a person have a separate water for Pesach? I've always had
No, you do not. You actually do not need to.
one died now. So
Yeah, no, you actually don't need to. Just boil it through.
Just one?
Just once, yeah.
Even though you said maybe with
Yeah, and that's it's, I think Rabbi Taub said that for about 15 years in a row. It comes up every single year. What do you do about an urn for Pesach? Yeah.
even though it's standing on the counter.
Even though it's standing on the counter. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Just one question about the dishwasher thing.
Yeah.
So you're not allowed to use, obviously the same dishwasher can we milk.
Right.
Let's say you have a dairy and milk is dishwasher, and then someone accidentally puts.
Okay. Well, right. So there's that's it's a whole complicated because depending on the type of dishwasher, how much residue there was, when the soap comes into the dishwasher. Yeah. Right. There's lots of rooms to be lenient. The good news is lots of rooms to be lenient. That's the truth. Yeah.